Okay, guys, welcome back to Let's Get Freaky podcast. I am so excited to welcome our next guest tonight. He is such an awesome dude. I would say in the Bigfoot world, an absolute legend as well. We've got Marc
Oh,
Myrsell. How are you, brother? Thank you so much
hey,
for being here.
Tommy. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So let's see. Right here on Pacific Coast time, it is 5:34. What in the afternoon or evening? What time is it for
So
you out there?
where I am right now, it's 1:30, but
Oh, okay.
I live on US time, but 1:30 in AM that is.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
But
yeah.
I live on US time, brother. So it's this is
All
very
right.
normal for me. But
Okay. Well,
I am pumped to have you on the podcast, man. I really
oh,
am.
Tommy, no, thanks so much, man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me onto your show. Of course, when you reached out to me to ask me to be on your show, you and I have never had any contact. But I try to vet my podcasters, if I
Hmm.
can say that.
Yep.
And I checked out your stuff, and I was like, yeah, I got to hang out with Tommy. So
You.
thank you so much, man.
Oh,
I
thank
appreciate
you,
it.
man. It's an absolute
Absolutely.
pleasure. So I knew about your work before, but I very recently watched a documentary, Small Town Monsters, on
Ah,
YouTube. I believe it's on other platforms as well.
yes.
The Ape Canyon documentary.
Yep.
Fascinating stuff, man. And I was like, I
Uh,
need to talk
yeah.
to you.
Oh, thanks. A lot of people have contacted me and said, hey, you have a movie out. The Siege of Ape Canyon was released by Small Town Monsters last November, if I remember, and you have a movie coming out. Well, really, it's not, I have to tell you, it's not my movie. It's just my research project, and I'm just the talent.
Hmm.
Really, it's Eli Watson's movie, who directed and produced the movie for Small Town Monsters. And Eli and I are the best of pals. We're the best of friends. And we hang out and have like about 20 other projects that we have to do before we're dead. But Eli and I worked together hard on the Siege of Ape Canyon, of course, produced by ultimately Seth Breedlove, who runs Small Town Monsters. And the way that the Siege of Ape Canyon came out, I can only say, my name is Marc Myrsell, and I approve this message. The Ape Canyon story came out the way I wanted it to, the way that Eli made the movie.
Hmm.
So I'm really proud of Eli because I love him. He's one of my best mates. But I'm really glad the way the story was told.
That's awesome, man. That is, I mean, everything Small Town Monsters do is class, I would say. All their documentaries, all their films, I love them all. That was absolutely fantastic. And the Ape Canyon story for your Bigfoot enthusiast, it's got to be one of the most, I would say, well-known stories. When you look at all the history of Bigfoot sightings and experiences, that is well up there as one of the most famous and most exciting, really, when you look at what took place. I think I heard you talking on, I don't know how long ago it was. It was on Bigfoot and Beyond with Cliff and Bobo, which shout out to
Yeah.
those guys, one of my favorite podcasts. And you were saying on the show that even though it is one of the most well-known Bigfoot stories, people still get things wrong about it. And I'm sure this was before the documentary came out recently, and how it's such a well-known story, but at the same time, not some of the facts are not that well known, and you've really brought that to light.
I was actually thinking about you, Tommy, last night, getting ready for our chat today, and and I was thinking about it. The Ape Canyon story of the 1924 incident is definitely one, like you pointed out, one of the Bigfoot classics. Anybody who is remotely interested in the Bigfoot phenomenon, there are two things that they know: the Patterson Gimlin film and the Ape Canyon story, as well as Boggy Creek and other Bigfoot stories. And so those details of what happened during 1924, that's the story. But in a sense, the legend of Ape Canyon has almost taken on a life of itself that people, at least around here in the Pacific Northwest in the United States, everybody has heard one version of that story or another. I talk to people, it's like, hey, have you ever heard about that 1924 incident up at Ape Canyon on Mount St. Helens? And they're like, no, not really. But then I get into the details and they're like, wait a minute, I've heard this story. And so the events and the narrative of the legend has kind of taken on a life of its own, almost adding into the actual events, you know.
Hmm.
And so sometimes the details are correct. I'm very erudite because this is my baby. This is my project, you know.
Hmm.
And I think that I know everything, which I don't. But you know, sometimes those details are correct, sometimes those details are not correct. But everybody who brings me their version of the Ape Canyon story, particularly if some of their grandfathers or grandmothers were involved, I'm highly interested in what they have to say. What's their version of the story? What was the family's understanding of Ape Canyon when their grandfathers encountered these miners in 1924? What I've always wanted to do is try to preserve this story, preserve all of the field and document evidence, even if it's right or wrong, and put it in together collectively.
Hmm. Hmm. It's like every great story, it's there's going to be parts that are added on when people are retelling it. Obviously, we're in
Yeah.
a different world now to 1924. Like it was a lot of word of mouth stuff. Like obviously that we had the newspaper. It was reported in the newspaper at the time. That a couple of weeks after the event, is that right?
Let's see. The crazy thing is that newspapers at the time. One of my backstories with our museum work here at the Westport Aquarium and stuff is that we've gotten very much into printing presses and like letter type printing presses, and we take them around to museums and schools and stuff. And so, literally, sometimes I'm taking our little printing press with all the tiny little type that it takes in order to make an article, and I have to hand set that type, right? So, one thing that you have to realize is that the first paper that published an article on the 1924 Ape Canyon attack was the Longview Daily News. The Longview Daily News, the very first article was Kelso miners back with tale of mountain devils. And the Longview Daily News was published as an evening newspaper, came out about 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and they got the reporter got the story, wrote up the story, the typesetters set the type, and the paper was published about 48 hours after the attack.
Wow.
So the attack happened on July the 10th, which was a Thursday night in 1924. The paper of the first article came out 48 hours later on Saturday, which is an amazing feat.
Yeah.
So with that, the story, we had the Associated Press wire that went all over the United States, and the Associated Press also was traveled internationally as well. And the story spread like wildfire all over the United States and somewhat internationally as well, I found out. So, and this
Wow.
was just 48 hours after the attack of these big, hairy ape men on Mount St. Helens attacking this remote cabin up in Mount St. Helens. So it's
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing.
Wow. So the story got out for the time extremely quick.
Very, very
Wow.
quickly, almost like Facebook.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, in a way.
Wow. I mean, because in today's world, obviously, something happens, it's instantly everywhere around the world in seconds, in less than
Right.
seconds. But for obviously that time, that's incredible, man.
It is. Yeah.
Wow. So for anyone that doesn't know the Ape Canyon story, there will be people listening that may not know, that may have heard of it. Would you be able to give a brief, I know there's a lot to it, so you haven't got to tell us everything, but a brief description of what took place in 1924?
Well, of course, I've been asked this question before, and I'm a great conversationalist, so I can go on and on and on.
That's cool.
I'll try to give you a quick elevator lift here. So there was a core group of men in Kelso, Longview, which are two adjoining towns next door to each other in Cowlitz County, Washington. Most of the men were family members. The head of the group was a fellow named Marion Smith. In 1924, during the attack, I believe Marion was about 64, 65 years old. He was not a spring chicken in 1924. He grew up in the age of big timber, these massive, massive monsters of trees being taken out of the forest for the timber industry. He had been up in the mountains all of his life, working in the timber industry and also going out fishing, hunting, just hiking, whatever. He was a true mountain man, and he had seen and saw and heard everything that there was to see up in the mountains. Well, Marion Smith knew that basalt coming out of a volcano like Mount St. Helens produces gold. He knew that there was gold coming out of the mountain. And later in life, he started going up and looking for it. He employed his Marion Smith. He employed his son-in-law, Fred Beck. He later got in his son, Leroy Perry Smith, and other friends of the family, Mac Rhodes, John Peterson, and his cousin Gabe Lefever. In 1918, they started scouting up the Lewis River east of Woodland, Washington, where actually there is still gold coming out along the Lewis River in placer locations. They were initially looking for a placer location for gold. At one point, for whatever reason, they headed north and hit the east shoulder of Mount St. Helens. If you can imagine the southeast corner of the volcano, you go up along the east shoulder and then down to the northeast corner of Mount St. Helens. It was basically right at the east shoulder at the midpoint where they decided to do a mine. This was not a placer location. This was a load claim of dynamiting and digging into the side of a prominent butte about a mile from the top of Mount St. Helens, and they started digging in. They laid their claim, their mining location notice in 1922, and they started digging. You have to understand that this is at an elevation of about 4,500 feet above sea level. It's way up at the timberline, and which means a lot of yearly snows. What they were they This was not a commercial operation, a year-round operation for their gold mine. They still had to like work their regular jobs. These were only like four, five, six guys working the mine. But they still had to work their regular mill and timber jobs back in town. They couldn't stay there year round either because of the amount of snow up there. So, what they were doing is that around late May, early June or so, they would come in and they would tent camp at the base of Pumice Butte in order to work the mine. They would go from their tent camp up to the top, about 1,000 feet down the east side of Pumice Butte, in order to work their mine. Well, by November, I can still say today, you have to be out of there because November there's just too much snow to get any work done. I've always said that you could stay there year round, but all you'd be doing is like surviving on something like there, even in the wintertime, there's not deer up there. There's just these rodents, marmots. You could shoot those and eat those, I guess. But So they had to be out of there by November. While they were still tent camping in 1922 and 1923, they started to hear strange things from the mountain. Now, Marion Smith, in his interviews, in his newspaper interviews in 1924, he said in his interviews that he knew of some old stories from loggers who were much older than him, as well as a couple of native folks, mainly Cowlitz Nation, who told old stories of seeing a very large hair-covered creature that walked upright like a man, maybe about 7 feet, maybe 7.5 feet tall, leaving large footprints. Marion knew these stories, and so did a couple of the older folks like Gabe Lefever, his cousin, and John Peterson, his friend. They had known those stories before, but when they were up there in 22 and 23, working the mine, they started hearing strange things. There'll be a high pitched whistling sound from one of the ridge tops, and then quiet, quiet. And then there'd be an answering high pitched whistling sound from another ridge top. And there'd be these whistling sounds talking back and forth. At one point, Leroy, Marion's son, it was his job to wash the pots and pans at a stream nearby their camp. Leroy goes down with the pots and pans and he finds this massive human-like footprint in the sandbar. And he brings the guys over. He's like, hey, 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 look at this. And sure enough, everybody saw this very large footprint, 14, 15 inches long. And it's like, we didn't know, they didn't know what to do with it. But gold is gold. Apparently, at that point, there was gold coming out of the mine. Let's keep working it. There was at the end of 1923, and they had to break camp, go back into town for the winter. They decided that there was enough gold coming out of the mine so that when they returned the next spring in 1924, enough tent camping. The gold is good enough. Let's build a cabin right by the mine, a strong enough cabin that could hold our stores, tools, canned beans, or whatever. So we don't have to haul our cookies back and forth, every winter. Let's build a cabin to hold all of our stuff. When they came back in 1924, late spring, early summer, that's what they did. They built a cabin and it wasn't a full-time operation because they were still wanted to work the mine. But late May, maybe early June, they got back and they built a cabin. When I first started researching this, I just had a crappy little grainy photo that was published in the Oregonian newspaper in 1924 that I had to work off of in order to try to find the site. It wasn't until about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago where through a family member of part of the story, I was able to acquire these magnificent photos out of a family photo album of the cabin that was taken about a week out. The photos were taken about a week after the attack that shows how incredibly massive this cabin was. It was a formidable cabin. I mean, the individual logs are 18, 20 inches in diameter. This is about 10 foot by 20 foot. They built a formidable cabin. So it was at one point where they were getting water off of this incredibly steep slope where they had blasted a shelf near the mine in order to build the cabin. The spring is about where they can get water is about 75 feet away. Leroy Smith is coming back from getting water. The rest of the guys are about 80 feet vertically down, working the mine. Leroy comes back with buckets of water, and there's something coming out of the brush, maybe about 50 or 75 feet. And this thing comes out, and it is just a very, very large hair-covered creature. At that point, his dad, Marion, said, nobody leaves camp unarmed. So Leroy had his sidearm and he takes 3 shots into this creature, only about 50, 75 feet away. The creature turns and goes back into the brush. Previous to that, about a week before, Fred and Marion had encountered the same individual or a similar looking individual right by the spring when they were getting water. Fred takes three shots into it about 4 or 5 days before, and the creature just turns. This is about 300 feet away, and the creature turns and just goes back up the bluff like nothing happened. It was on the late afternoon of Thursday, the July the 10th of 1924, when the rest of the guys are in the cabin. Poor Leroy, who was about 18 or 19 years old at the time, he comes back from the spring again. The creature comes out from the brush. Leroy takes a shot into it, a single shot. The rest of the fellows in the cabin hears the shot and they're ready. They come booking it out of the cabin and start shooting into this creature. Marion estimated in his interviews that about 16 rounds went into this creature. Fred was running with a 30-30 Winchester, and and for the rifle, we know that Leroy was using a Remington autoloader with about five shots. My gun friend said it was sort of like the predecessor to the AK, sort of. And anyway, about 16 shots go in. Fred took the last shot, and the creature either fell off of the bluff. The cabin was only about 10 feet from the edge down into the canyon. He either fell or the creature crouched down and climbed down. At that point, all the guys are going to bed. It's getting dark, and we're like, we're the hell out of here. We need to get the fuck out of here. I don't care how much gold is here. Let's get out of here. So that's what we're going to do in the morning. It's dark. So it was just shortly after dark when the cabin has a massive impact against the outside, against the wall, enough to knock out the chinking between the logs. It's like, what the hell was that? They look out, and it was a pretty good moonlit night that July, and they can see six or seven of these big hair covered creatures going around the cabin. Well, all hell breaks loose. They start shooting. These creatures are throwing rocks and boulders on top of the cabin. They're climbing up on top of the shake roof, trying to beat their way in. We found out later, after reporters got there the next week, that night something was trying to dig underneath the foundation. They tear apart their bunks, they blockade the door, and everything's trying to, they build up the fire to try to like scare them away. And they're shooting anytime any of these creatures got on top of the roof, they're shooting through the shake roof, and they're singing and they're yelling, please go away, please go away. We'll go away in the morning, and then we'll never come back. We'll all go away in the morning and everything will be fine. This attack onto the cabin by these large 7-foot hair covered creatures lasts all night long. Dawn shows up. July. That's probably like around 6-ish in the morning, maybe 7 in the morning. Everything's quiet. And these fellows must have had to swallow hard to unblockade the door and open the door. And when they go outside, there's rocks and boulders scattered everywhere. They had a big pile of leftover shakes for the roof, and those are scattered everywhere. And they find these huge, large, human-like footprints in the dirt all around the cabin. My thing that I always say: grab your guns, grab your tobacco, and let's get the hell out of there. And they split, and it was about 6 mile hike back to their truck on the north side, up to the north to Spirit Lake. And it must have been the longest walk of their lives. And except for one time when the two youngest miners, Fred and Leroy, went back the next week to take reporters up there, they abandoned everything. They abandoned their cabin, they abandoned their gold. We're never going back. Marion Smith was quoted in the newspaper, I don't care how much gold there is up there, I'm never going back again. And mind you, Marion was the consummate mountain man. And he was known as a nice man, a very congenial, very, very nice man, but he wasn't scared of anything. But something scared the shit out of him that night. And they never went back.
Yeah.
So that
Wow.
that that's the brief elevator ride on Ape Canyon in 1924.
Wow, man. It's incredible. And as you say, these guys were the tough dudes. They're used to
Absolutely.
being in like hard environments, and for them to not want to go back when there's clearly a lot of gold there that's worth a lot of money, that's wild. It says it all.
Yeah. The thing is that to go back to Eli's movie, The Siege, that is one of the easiest ways to access. Well, I might post some more photos on Facebook, but Eli's movie features some of Sandy Moyer's photos that she let me use from her great uncle. It shows in parts of the movie, it shows these photos of how incredible it was for these men to build that kind of cabin out in the middle of nowhere with just basic hand tools and also work a gold mine that I understand went back about 75 feet or so, just with hand digging and dynamite. These men were made of something that you and I are not made of
Hmm.
anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
Us humans.
Yeah.
These guys were pretty incredible just to build this cabin and do this mine.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah, different kind of
the
dudes.
cabin was formidable. The story is formidable, but these men were incredibly formidable.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
hardy fellows.
So not men that you're going to mess with, basically, and so
Yeah,
whatever they've experienced must have been terrifying. We know they were terrified.
absolutely,
Wow.
absolutely.
Do you think it's possible that they killed the Bigfoot, and that's why there was the initial shooting where they all went outside and they saw it
But
drop?
I have to say no. Um, I'm not I'm a strange adult white male American in the fact that I've never fired a weapon. I don't know anything about guns at all.
Hmm.
But I've relied on very, very good friends who do know guns. And so let's say that an adult individual Sasquatch I've heard estimates just simply based on sightings of maybe 600 pounds or so. Some have estimated maybe up to 800 pounds. I tend to think that it may be uh, bigger than that, in the fact that you have a 7 or 8 foot tall individual who is, by reports, is obviously very, very good at climbing precipitous slopes, scrabbled slopes. I tend to think that the estimate should be going up to maybe 900 or maybe 1,000 pounds or so. I understand that the two guns that we know is a 30-30 Winchester that Fred had, which is certainly enough for, shooting a deer or an elk. My friend Brad says that a 30-30 round can blow a hole through a squash or a pumpkin like nothing. But nonetheless, for an individual mammalian creature who is, say, 900 pounds, 1,000 pounds, you may need something more like a polar bear gun or an elephant gun in order for you to take it down and actually kill a Sasquatch of that size.
Hmm.
But also because of the individual interviews and reports, particularly from Fred Beck, from Marion Smith, and from Leroy Smith, who all the miners were interviewed and published in the newspaper, but those three continually told their reports of shooting at the individual that they encountered, seemingly to no effect. and the Sasquatch turns around like, they're just going for a glass of milk and just went back in. It went back into the brush, seemingly unaffected. So that
Wow.
final shot that was reported takenly by Fred Beck, and the creature went down in the canyon, I highly doubt it. I highly
Hmm.
doubt if one was killed. I am working on another project down in Southwest Oregon of a much bigger hunk of time from about 1875 into the early aughts or 1910 that's very similar, where this group of Sasquatch were seen. Shots were taken into them at very close range, maybe 75 or 100 feet, and it was also seemingly to no effect, where the
Wow.
Sasquatch were like, whatever, and they just turned and went back home.
Hmm.
So the idea the idea of of say uh Sasquatch phenomenon, that Sasquatch as a flesh and blood creature being recognized by the mainstream scientific community, wherein we would need to bring in a body. Honestly, I, I, at this point, with my historical research, I don't know what it would take. A
Hmm.
cannon, a
Yeah.
bazooka? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you imagine these creatures must be they're so much superior to us. You know, as you say, the effects of a gun, a small gun to them, it's not going to affect them.
Right.
That's wild. So the two miners that went back, you say they took the press there. Was it a week later? Did you say?
It was almost 1 week to the day. Yes,
Oh,
the
okay.
attack happened. The attack happened on July the 10th, a Thursday, and then their return trip, the two miners that went back was Fred Beck and Leroy Smith, and because they were the youngest, but they took reporters, Forest Service rangers up there. They also took a couple of, for whatever reason, uh, Portland, Oregon policemen, which was outside of their jurisdiction because they were in another state. But for whatever reason, the two policemen went up there with them. It was a relatively large group of maybe about, I would estimate maybe about 7 or 8 people, and to go up there and do the route, go down to the cabin site, go down to the mine, and just for them to see it. So fortunately, I want to get back to Sandy Moyer, who provided me these photos. It was her grandfather's brother, which would be her great uncle, who was the Forest Service ranger at Spirit Lake, a fellow named Bill Welch. And Bill Welch lived at Spirit Lake with his newly married wife Wilma, and he was the head Forest Service ranger for Spirit Lake. Bill, on the morning of Friday, July the 11th, Bill and Wilma were the first people to encounter the miners when they bailed on their cabin and bailed on their gold mine and got in their truck that was parked right next to Bill's house. And he was the first one. Wilma was the first one to talk to the miners, but then Bill did. And so when Leroy and Fred came back up, Fred and Leroy led Bill, the reporters, and the policemen up to the site to see it. The thing is about Bill Welch is that he was not an ardent denier of this crazy claim of 8 men up on the volcano. He was also not a confirmer. He was just like, well, this is what the guys said. I don't know if they were actually attacked by large, hairy 8 men up on Mount St. Helens. But about 40 years later, Bill did a newspaper interview that was published in the Columbian, and he recounted what he saw that Friday morning in 1924. The guy showed up, knocked on the house door, and Wilma answered the door. And Bill was in the barn, and Bill comes out and he recognizes these guys because he knew these fellows. And the guy, all except Marion loaded into the pickup truck. Marion says to Bill, "We got him. We got one. We got one." And Bill the ranger says, "Got what?" "A mountain devil. We shot one. We got one." And Bill was like, "Well, cougar?" "No, no, no. You know what I'm talking about? A mountain devil. A wolverine? No, a mountain devil. It's those things I was telling you about." And Bill was like, "Okay, Marion, whatever." And Marion goes to drive into the driver's seat of the truck. Bill follows them. And Bill said when he looked in that truck, he had never seen a group of men more white as sheets and scared. Something had obviously affected them the night before, scared the shit out of them. And they drove down the road and the rest hit the papers. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I guess that reaction and people seeing that reaction obviously helped fuel the story because people are they got no reason to lie about this. There's a lot of gold there that's going to be worth a lot of money. Why would they?
Yeah.
There's no reason for them to do that. So,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. What we were talking about sort of like the wind up of
Hmm.
the Ape Canyon story. We actually hear this too with the Patterson Gimlin film of a deathbed confession of a hoax. There is a rumor that I've heard before of a deathbed confession regarding the Ape Canyon attack, where
Hmm.
somebody was on their deathbed and said, "No, no, no, we made the whole thing up." But I have found zero evidence of any deathbed confession.
Hmm.
Um, Fortunately, I've been able to track down family members of the miners, including a woman who's become a good friend of mine, Betty Mitchell, who is the daughter of the youngest miner, Leroy Perry Smith. And she was like, "Nope, my dad and my uncle were the most straight people I've ever met. They were honest. They always told the truth. And I believe every word what they say."
Hmm.
So there was no deathbed confession. There are plenty of explain it away theories of the Ape Canyon attack on the cabin, but with my research, frankly, none of them hold water at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Because in 1924, what would be the financial benefit of lying about something like that? I don't think there would be, would there? There wouldn't be.
Well, no, I don't think so. Um, which which kind of gets me on to sort of another topic, another facet of Ape Canyon. Fred Beck, and I think Marion did as well, reported that the assays on a gold mine to figure out what's the percentage of how many ounces of gold are you going to get out of per ton of ore that you get out of a mine. And apparently they said the assays were quite good of this gold coming out of the Vanderwhite mine. Well, fortunately, I've just found the repository that holds assays that are filed for gold in 1924.
Oh,
It,
wow.
they're up in National Archives up in Seattle. Uh, Trying to be a good researcher. Not everything is online. I've contacted my archivist at National Archives, and she was like, "Mark, I'm sorry. There's about 12 bankers' boxes of paper records that fit what you're looking for. There's nothing to do but come up here and go through piece of paper by pieces of paper, right? To see if there actually is a record of how much gold the Vanderwhite mine, the Ape Canyon mine, was getting. I am also working with the National Forest archaeologist because he wants to go down there with me because he's never seen it. Um, and I'm working on a permit in order to take small samples out of the mine as well that could be possibly assayed. I have to pay for the assay, but possibly get those assayed so we can compare apples and oranges. If I can find an historical record of how much gold was coming out in 1924 and 1923 compared with today, then that may just add more, add just another data piece, add
Mhm.
another part of the story about how much gold was really coming out of there.
Yeah. Wow, man. It's incredible stuff, man. So obviously, at some point, the location of the cabin was lost. Is that we lost
The
where it
last,
was?
yeah, the last record that I have of it being documented was in 1936. There was a Forest Service map of the Spirit Lake, and it was a map of it was like a recreational map. It was like maybe 11 by 17, and it was like you can take this trail, you can go fishing in this lake, it stopped with trout or whatever. And there was a small paragraph where it was called, maybe for the first time in print, Ape Canyon. And the map said you can stand on the ledge and in 1936 look down and see the remnants of the cabin where these men were purportedly attacked by mountain devils. That was the last record that I have of, yes, Eddie Canyon, yes, there's a cabin there. And that's where everyone was attacked. Since then, it's basically been lost to time. I have two reports of that I got through interviews. Again, the Patterson Gimlin film. I had heard that Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson visited Mount St. Helens looking for the cabin site. About 10 years ago, that was the first time I met Bob Gimlin at a conference. And he told me his story of him and Roger going up to try to find the cabin. And Bob told me that he thought it was about 1962, maybe 1963. Bob said that yes, they did visit the cabin. He said that there was snows and just through lack of maintenance and time, the cabin was kind of like just falling in on itself. The other record that I have, or it was through an interview, was I was able to track down Rod Beck. He lives out in Idaho. He's Fred Beck's grandson, and he didn't. He at, I'm not sure, and I don't want to tell tales, but I think that Rod had some early teenager problems and went to go live with his grandfather Fred. And he basically, in his teenage years, grew up with his grandfather Fred Beck. And the thing about my interviews with Rod is that two things is that he said that his grandfather Fred was a straight shooter, and whatever he said was absolutely the truth. Fred gave him directions about how to try to get to the old cabin site in the mine. Rod said that maybe in the late 60s or early 70s, he did visit the mine. And he said that he got in there. This is, of course, before the eruption of Mount St. Helens. He did go in there and it went back about 75 feet or so. But other than that, yeah, the whole site had been lost, except for that, it had been basically lost since 1924.
Wow. Wow, man. So when was your first knowledge of Ape Canyon? When did it start for you? When did you first get interested in the topic? Was it something that was from childhood or
It was sort of in two separate phases of my life. Early on, for uh, anybody who's watching who's a massive Bigfoot nerd, they'll probably know the movie Sasquatch: Legend of Bigfoot. I believe it came out in 76 or so. And in that movie, the Sasquatch Legend of Bigfoot basically follows contemporary researchers going up to Canada or something like that to go look for Bigfoot. And but part of the movie up until Eli's movie, the Sasquatch Legend of Bigfoot held the best recreation of the Ape Canyon incident. It's a short 15 or 10 or 15 minute segment of the attack on Ape Canyon. And I remember watching that on late night TV on a rerun, and frankly, it scared the hell out of me. Um, these dark, shadowy creatures throwing boulders down, and I knew at the time of where I grew up outside of Portland, Oregon, that there was some sort of a geographic proximity. I knew I was kind of close, but that story and those images from the movie always kind of stuck in my brain. Um, but honestly, to give a shout out to a friend of mine, Nick Redfern, um, he, uh, he, for anybody who's not familiar with Nick, hey, well, Tommy, have you had Nick on your show?
I don't think,
Nick
no, I
Redfern?
haven't. I'd like
Oh,
to.
you should. Oh my
Yeah.
God. No, that'd be great if you could have Nick on your show
Yeah,
because
man.
uh, Nick, because of the history with his dad being RAF and stuff, Nick got highly interested in UFO phenomenon, particularly all around England.
Oh,
Uh, but
wow.
that but that kind of like led him down the road of other unexplained phenomenon. So while Nick was still living um, outside of London, he got word of a very, very old story down in Cornwall of reports around 1880s, 1890s of a man monkey, a large hair covered creature that walked upright like people, scaring the hell out of people around Cornwall, that it could apparently jump from tree to tree way up there 30 or 40 feet. Well, he grabs two buddies of his, and they decide to get into a crappy old van and head southwest through Devonshire down to Cornwall in search of the story of the Cornish man monkey. And he
Wow.
wrote this all up in a book that he called Three Men Seeking Monsters, and it's worth the read, and I think it should be turned into a movie because it's basically like a buddy road trip story of three guys going down to find this old story down in Cornwall of the man monkey and all the weird people that they meet along the way. Their van breaks down, and anyway, they're trying to get it fixed. They get drunk, they can't remember where their van is. All these great stories of three men seeking monsters. But it wasn't until later in the book where Nick came up with this idea, and part of this came from our predecessor, John Fort, where Nick repeated and averred of what John Fort said. If you have this research project of ghosts or lights in the sky or any kind of unexplained phenomenon, and you're researching it, if you look around the general timeline and if you look around the general geographic area of your research project, more often than not, you will also find other incidences of high strangeness, as Fort used to say. Well, that idea intrigued me. Also, Nick did bring up a little bit about Ape Canyon. So I started to pull these files off of my shelf again, and that's how I got back into Ape Canyon, because this whole idea of what Fort and Nick Redfern promulgated of looking through, say 5 years before and 5 years later, and the geographic area looking for other strange things, I purposely tested it out. And that's how I got back into what I saw on Sasquatch Legend of Bigfoot to try to test out this theory of Ape Canyon. And it basically turned into sort of a midlife crisis that I've been living with for like 25 years or so.
Well, thankfully you have, because
Thanks.
it's
Thank
what
you.
we've learned from your work is incredible, and it's
Mm.
proved it. It's proved that it's happened, and it's so cool, man. That's wild that you say about Cornwall. I'm very close to Cornwall. I know we was talking before. You're actually
Yeah,
your lineage is from Devonshire and where I am. So that's pretty cool, man. We've got a connection.
yeah. The Myrsell name, it's a long, stupid story, but I spell my name Myr, but I was born with Mur, Sell. And there were two brothers that came out of cows out of the Isle in White and went to go help their uncle in Newfoundland and through
Wow.
Devonshire. And so that's one of the ways I got to the United States. But if you look, okay, short, boring story. But I play a lot of music, and I play the button box melodeon,
Oh,
and
wow.
I was thrilled when I found a two-row, a DG melodeon that was for sale on eBay, and it came from cows on Isle of Wight. And
Wow.
I wrote to the guy when I was buying it from him, and I was like, "Hey, have you ever heard the Myrsell name?" And he's like, "Oh no, man, no, mate. We got no. There's a few Myrsells still sticking around Devonshire and Isle
That's
of Wight,
so
and
cool.
down in Southeast. So anyway, family connections.
That's awesome.
Anyway, yeah.
I can see the Isle of Wight from my town. I can see it in the distance, Isle of
Oh,
Wight.
really?
Yeah,
Oh,
man.
geez.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then
Oh,
Devon, I'm not far from Devon and Cornwall as well.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
a small world, brother, as we said
It
before.
is a small world. Yeah, it is. It's kind of spooky when you get down to it. It is a very
Yeah,
small
oh,
world.
absolutely. Yeah, man.
And especially, maybe when you and I were young, we used to call it the 9 degrees of separation, where you have a friend and that has, so the 9 degrees of separation. But now the world's gotten a lot smaller,
Yeah.
thanks to, the devil's magic that we call the internet.
Hmm.
But now it's basically just like 1 degree of separation. Every, everyone knows it, or
Yeah,
can get to know everyone else.
yeah. I think it's cool in a way. I do
Yeah, it
like
is.
we can do this. It's really cool. It's,
Absolutely. No,
yeah,
absolutely. I completely agree. Yep.
yeah, man. So you started looking into the area again, and is that when you decided you're going to find this cabin?
I started to so my main bread and butter is I'm a land surveyor in order to figure out people's property corners and property lines and do topographic maps and help people out with their property. With land surveying, especially out here in the western part of the United States, the most property lines and property ownership are really, really screwed up. So I basically can be working for the next 500 years trying to fix everyone's problems. There's a tremendous amount of document research. It's sort of like archaeology light, wherein someone wants you to figure out their property lines and what they own. First thing I do is a massive amount of document research to find the document evidence. Then, with that document evidence, I have to go out and find the field evidence of what's in the ground, old survey monuments, old fence lines, things in the field. And I have to mesh that field evidence and document evidence together to see what fits, what corresponds, what corroborates, or what doesn't, and make a determination based on that. Well, I realized that, believe it or not, those skills can be applied to historical Sasquatch research, it can be applied to a lot of different things. Looking into the Ape Canyon story, initially just newspaper reports, mine reports, etc., I started to realize that where this cabin and this mine may have been in 1924 could have survived, possibly could have survived the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. There was no map. There was a very, very loose basket full of clues of where the mine and cabin were at the time in the 1920s. But I kind of cornered it down with this basket full of clues to within, say, an oblong half mile by quarter mile site. And I thought that it may have survived the eruption. I started doing more document research, and in 2011, in October, that's when I took my first trip up there by myself for the first like about 5, 4, 5, maybe 6 times. to go up Pumice Butte, down Pumice Butte, where I thought the cabin and the mine were, and then each and every time a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. It wasn't until 2013, in the third week of June, where I was blathering on and blabbing with my friends about what I was doing. And they were like, "You got to take me with you. Come on, you got to take me with you." So, me and four good friends went up there in the third week of June in 2013. And that's when the foundation of the cabin, their tools, bent spoon, bent wire, nails were found. And it's like,
You
we
got it.
got the cabin in 2013. Yeah, it was,
Wow.
it was, it was, well, like I said, I'm a land surveyor. And in any good field research, nothing is ever 100%, no matter what your discipline. Nothing is 100%. But at that point, I was like somewhere around 98.5, 99% that, yeah, we had actually found the cabin site. Um, and it's still kind of a dream for me. How can this be possible? How can it be possible that after, at that point, whatever it was, 80 years ish or so, and that we actually did find the cabin site? But
Incredible,
then
man.
since then, the mine entrance has been found about a year and a half ago, and it all corroborates to what the reporters who visited the site and published their findings to. Everything just suddenly is like funneling into this very small funnel where all the evidence is all coming together,
Mhm.
and it all makes sense. So yeah, I do think that we got it.
Wow. Incredible stuff, man. And
Yeah,
so you found, I know it's in the documentary, you found a piece of wire that was in one
it
of
is.
the pictures, and it's exactly the same in the picture. Like
It
it's
is.
definitely the same piece of wire. Was it a piece of wire or was it?
Yeah, now initially, yeah, it is a piece of wire. And things that I found out there, we have to deal with 19 teens, 19 early 20s steel. And steel over 100 years ago was a lot more formidable. It was very, very good steel. So actually, the way it worked in 2013, there was only me and one other friend, um, Gabe Tammy, who had enough courage to go down 1,000 feet, to go down there with me. Um, you can see in the grainy Oregonian photos of in front of the cabin in this photo, you can see the stumps that the miners cut down in order to build their cabin. I knew I had talked with the archaeologist at the time for the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, and he confirmed that there was no record of that steep, precipitous slope ever being logged. It was just too dangerous and there weren't enough trees down there. So he said it had never been logged. But in the photo, you can see cut down trees right in front of this cabin. I knew that if I could find old rotten stumps, I knew I'd be close. So it was me and Gabe Temmie. We got down there in early afternoon and we found a stump. We found another stump. We found another stump. Hot damn. I know that we're close. Break out the metal detector. And that bent wire was the very first thing that I found. It was sort of like in a strange, maybe shape of a Z ish, with curlicues on the end, as if you would bring the whole thing together and make it a baling wire. I thought it was a baling wire to hold together maybe wood or shakes or something like that. But it wasn't until I found that photo again in Chris Murphy's book that he published, which was one of the photos that was taken a week after the attack, where I realized it was actually a wire over the spit to hang their coffee pot or a pot of beans in order to do it. And and that's when I realized it wasn't until like 7 or 8 years later, I still had the wire, of course, where I was like, holy crap, that's the wire in the photo from 1924, published in Chris Murphy's book. And that wire, along with some of the artifacts that we've been able to use for outreach and education, are currently on display on long-term loan at Cliff's Place at the North American Bigfoot Center, where you can check that out.
They're only on loan. They're only on loan.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I know they are. I know they are. But this, like Cliff said, and like Cliff and I, well, the way I got to know Cliff is that he was still working for Finding Bigfoot at the time. This was like in their later seasons. And a production assistant called me when word got out of my findings at Ape Canyon. And the production assistant called me from Finding Bigfoot, and they're like, "We want to do an episode about Ape Canyon." And I was like, "Look, here is what it would take for a TV film company in order to do an episode of Ape Canyon." And they're like, "Forget it." Because it would
Wow.
take like 4 or 5, it would take like 4 or 5, it's very, very high production costs in order for me to take a film crew up there and do this whole thing. So they said, forget it. Well, Cliff got wind of it and he's like, give me Mark's number. So I'm literally, I'm sitting at the desk right now when the phone rang and, hey, Mark, this is Cliff Berrickman of Finding Bigfoot. And since then, Cliff and I are the very, very best of friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
And yeah, and he totally wanted to get into Ape Canyon. And since then, we've become the best of compadres. And so
Wow.
I've taken Cliff up there about two or three times or so to go research the site. But then, of course, in the middle of that time period, he decided to start a museum, even though I advised him against it. But the North American Bigfoot Center is like totally blown up, and it's become a great museum for visitors to go check out everything Bigfoot. But also, it's become an attraction for people who want to donate or share very, very obscure and important Sasquatch phenomenon documentation and research.
Hmm.
So Cliff right now probably has the biggest collection of casts, plaster casts in the world, as well as plenty of great files. The good thing about Cliff and Melissa about what they're doing is that yeah, they take these files, but they're not sequestering them and keeping them hidden. They're providing a database and they're scanning and indexing everything in so that it will eventually be available for everyone, you and me. You know, and
Wow.
that's one reason why anything cool that I find, paperwork wise or otherwise, I'm not going to keep it gatekeeping it in my files. It goes
Hmm.
to Cliff because the North
That's
American Bigfoot
awesome.
Center is where it should go.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I need to get over there. I really want to see
Yeah,
it.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tell me when you're coming. We'll go
Yeah,
out.
absolutely. I'd love to go to the site as well. How long does it take to get to the site?
When you park your car at the car park, um, it's about 5.5 miles up the trail, but then you have to go off trail. And even though off trail it's only about a quarter of a mile away, it's that quarter mile takes another 2 or 3 hours
Hmm.
because it's so damn dangerous. It is so damn dangerous to get to the cabin site. So honestly, what I do, it's about a 3 day trip with two overnights.
Hmm.
1 day to get up there, set up camp, because you're also hauling all the rope and all the gear up there. Your pack is like 60 or 80 pounds with all of your crap in it. And then the next morning, we get up, go up Pumice Butte, rope up, go down Pumice Butte, and we go giggle and check out the cabin site in the mine and everything, go back. And by the end of the day, you're too exhausted. So at the end of the day, then you pack everything up and go back to the car park. So
Wow.
anyway, yeah, it's at least 3 days.
Man, I want to
But
come out.
that being said, I have to go up again this coming summer. Like I said, no research project is ever done,
Hmm.
and there are some more leads of field investigation that I want to do concerning the spring site, concerning where the miners had built their ladder, and also the mine as well. Like I said, I'm trying to work with the Forest Service in order to take samples out of the mine. I have to be careful because there are some family rumors that the miners may have left a box of dynamite inside the back of the mine,
Whoa.
which is probably turned to like pure nitroglycerin by now.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Whoa.
I might be doing that this summer.
Wow. That's wild, man. I've got to ask you. So on your travels, you've been there many times. Have you encountered the Bigfoot yourself? Have you had any experiences where you think you've?
Uh, two two different answers up there. Uh, on the question. It was actually on that weekend, or the third weekend of June in 2013, uh, where my good friend Brad, he had heard something on the hike up, and Brad best adjective phrase um, was he thought that he heard something back in the woods off trail that sounded like drunken Hells Angels, drunken bikers. It was like rah, 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 yeah, back there in the woods somewhere. And I didn't hear it at the time, but I saw Brad standing there looking into the trees. What the hell's that? We get up to the top, and that Friday night, he heard the same thing, only there were two of them, and it was dark. And basically, our camp is a flat butte, and it goes down into a slight bowl, maybe losing like 20 feet in elevation, and then bam, it goes up to the mountain. And it was Friday night, and here too, some things out there, like you said, drunken Hell's Angels off of their gourds, just arguing, yeah, blah, 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 blah. Goes back to sleep. It was that Saturday night after Gabe and I had found the cabin. We come up and the sun's just starting to go down. And it was basically what it would say dusk. And Gabe's brother, Ben, was like, shut up, shut up, shut up. Come over here. And we stand on the edge of our campsite down in that bowl. And maybe 1,000 feet away, we can hear something up on the ridge line. And up there in the trees, the best thing that I could say, the best equivalent was Ron Moorhead's Sierra Sounds.
Mhm.
That's what it sounded like. It was this chattering combination of chattering, gibberish, howling, all kind of mixed in together of something very, very loud. And we all heard it. There was five of us. We all heard it. And we're like, what the hell is that? And it went on for a while. And then it got quiet. And then maybe 3 or 4 minutes later, tracing your eye down the ridge line downhill, there's a second one, and it sounds just like it. And really loud. And we heard that second one and the first one, the second one and the first one talking back and forth to each other. Kind of remarkably, were like Marion Smith's reports from 1924 of these two talking back and forth. A few minutes later, we hear a third one. A few minutes later, we hear a fourth one, way down the ridge line, way down there. The other guys didn't hear it, but I could swear way down the Muddy River. I could hear a fifth one. And it went at this, so this started like about 8 o'clock at night, and it lasted all night long. One, two, four, 1, 5, 1. These guys talking, whatever they were, talking back and forth to each other all night long.
Wow.
And all you can do at that point at 12:30 1 o'clock in the morning is get in your little tent and pull the sleeping bag up over your ears and try to go to sleep. And but we heard it all night long. I heard it again come dawn in the morning, and I went back to sleep. And then we all get up making coffee, and Ben, we're all together making coffee, and Ben was like, "Did you guys hear that?" And we were like, "What?" No, he didn't hear. No, I'm sorry. Did you guys smell that? Did you guys smell that? And we were like, no. And he said that around dawn, there was such a huge animal, musky like smell right there in camp that it woke him up. And we were like, did you go out and look? And he's like, hell no, I didn't go. I didn't go out and look. But oddly enough, right there in camp, I've collected stories from two other people who have camped right where we were who had other strange encounters up there up on Mount St. Helens. So
Can I,
that
can
that that that's a Mount St. Helens story. That being said, to give you a quick second part to your question, um, I'm just the historical research dude. I enjoy doing the historical uh, database research to add it to the database of the Sasquatch phenomenon. Down at Thompson Flat in Southwest Oregon, old story that I was telling you about that spanned 30 or 40 years. I was down there with friends doing research down there. Sure enough, my confirmation experience, as Shane Corson said, November 5:30, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, early evening, dark, huge conifer evergreen forest. Yeah. Oh, Tommy. Two, two things ran right out in front of me, like
Whoa.
crossing the road, and it freaked me out. It's hard to talk about because it's you know what I say is that not to talk disparagingly or glibly about combat veterans or firefighters that experience PTSD. You know, they've seen terrible things, but I kind of equate my feelings about what happened to me with other Sasquatch phenomenon witnesses where it just freaks you out so much, where you just have this loop in your brain of what you saw that you're reliving over and over again.
Mhm.
And sure enough, yeah, there were these two individuals that just it was the strangest 6 seconds of my life. These two individuals bolted out in front of me, and it freaked me out.
Wow.
My friends were there, and they pulled in behind me, like I'd gotten a flat tire or had broken down. And my friend said later, "You couldn't even talk." And I was like just a babbling. I was like, "Blah blah 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 blah." Two things crossed the road, and it was the strangest experience in my life.
Wow, man.
So anyway, there's my answer to your question.
Wow. I mean, it might be difficult, but how big were those things that you saw roughly?
Well, the good thing is that so it was me and Kim, Bobo and Rowdy in our cars, and Kim went on the next day. She didn't go, but the next day, Rowdy and Bobo went back to the site in the morning, and we did another drive-through, another recreation. Uh, Rowdy was in the passenger seat with me, and Bobo was up there, and we measured Bobo, and I took the same drive of recreating what I saw. And the best that we can tell is that the first individual that I saw, which was Paul, hair covered, bipedal, sort of blondish, dirty blonde, beige hair covering its body, was about 6.5 feet tall. The second individual was about 6 feet tall or so. And the interesting thing about the Thompson Flat Monster project, dating back to 1873, 1875. There were multiple encounters there, and all of the reported encounters that showed up in the newspaper kept the same repeating things of describing these individuals as 6 to 7 feet tall, not 10-foot monsters, 6 to 7 feet tall, covered with yellowish blonde fur or
Wow.
hair. And that's exactly what I saw crossing the road in front of me. So
Wow.
that night, when we got back into town, we were doing another project at a newspaper office nearby. In that hotel room, once we got a room, I did what I hope what a good researcher would do is I started sketching it out and I wrote down everything that I saw that afternoon. I We were out of cell phone reception area for about 3 or 4 days. The previous 3 or 4 days, that was my first time getting cell phone reception. And I called in to check in with Catherine, my sweetheart, my wife, and I I couldn't tell her. I couldn't
Wow.
tell her. It wasn't until I got back home and I was laying down in bed for that first night talking about the trip, and I was like, I got to tell you something. I saw something in the woods, and again, it is PTSD because I can't get through this story without choking up.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I didn't feel threatened. I didn't feel in danger, but whatever I saw of those two individuals just totally twigged my brain. It wasn't like anything I had ever seen ever before. And that first night when I got back home, I got about a quarter of the way through the story and I just started crying. And I don't know why, but I still choke up when I see the story.
Yeah.
And when I talk to other witnesses, um, I've always listened to witnesses' stories, but now I have a little bit more empathy
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
about what they're going through, and they're just trying to take this, reoccurring videotape in their brain of what they saw
Mm-hmm.
and trying to find a safe space in order to share
Yeah.
their story.
Yeah.
A
Because
lot of people say, "I want to see Bigfoot. I want to see Bigfoot." I got to tell you, no, you
mhm.
you don't.
Yeah.
It'll mess you up.
See, I'm guilty of that. I say I'd love to see a Bigfoot, and but I'm aware that for guys like you that have seen these things, it is a life-changing moment, and very special, very scary, I imagine. And oh man, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was like I said, it was the strangest 5 seconds of my life.
Yeah, I
So,
bet. Because I mean,
yeah,
even though you're aware of Bigfoot, you're aware of Ape Canyon, you do the research. I guess until you see something like that in front of you, it's like undeniable then, right?
yeah. I like our good friend Derek Randalls, who's part of the Olympic project. He said, you know, the best way he can explain it is I saw what I saw.
Hmm.
What it is, I don't know, but I saw what I saw, and it's undeniable what I saw. And it's the same thing with me. I saw what I saw.
Hmm. Incredible, man. Difficult question, but what do you think a Bigfoot is? And I know that's a difficult because we don't fully know, but
Well, actually, I'm going to answer your question by I'm going to give you an answer by repeating your question. No, we don't know. I don't know. I truly don't know. With um, my research and my trusted friends' research, I tend to fall into the flesh and blood ape, honestly. That being said, there are other reports coming from other individuals, um, well, let me back up a little bit. Something that's happened in the past 10, 12 years in the Bigfoot research community is this noun, if you will, called woo, where it's like woo, where we get into interdimensional beings, demons, even. Some people have totally left the Sasquatch research community because they're convinced that they're demons. Connections with UFOs or whatever, getting into mind speak, where some people communicate with them telepathically, some people communicate with them with glyphs, leaving out rocks and sticks and leaves and certain formations, communicate with. So I tend to not fall into that camp. However, I very much dislike this term of woo, because what we're doing is that those factions who are certain, say, they are communicating with Sasquatch through glyphs or mindspeak or whatever. Um, they also have real stories, much like I saw the two individuals cross the road, or I heard what I heard of these five individuals communicating with each other. To discount what they have to say, mind speak, glyphs, or whatever, we are alienating them. We are setting them apart where it's like, oh, well, you're full of shit and we don't believe you. We're alienating them and it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. No matter what, like I said, um, I it is Sasquatch real? I don't know, but I believe that 99% of the time, when someone says that they saw something in the woods, they did see something in the woods. What it is, I don't know. We can't relive another individual's experience.
Hmm.
We don't know what they saw and they heard or what they felt or whatever. And so, um, it, I, I doubt it. I don't see a lot of evidence of UFO connections or interdimensional beings or whatever. But that being said, like I said, when someone says that they saw something in the woods, yeah, they did. I'm sure they did see something in the woods.
Hmm.
Um, so that's a very long, complicated
Yeah,
answer, and I'm not
no,
even giving you an I'm not even giving
no,
you an
it
answer,
is an answer. Yeah,
except that I don't know.
yeah.
But I always keep the door open every damn minute.
Hmm.
Bring me your story, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going
Yeah,
to write it down,
yeah.
because there's some scintilla of something going on there that needs to be re-researched and re-investigated.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's where I am. As well, I think we all are really. We don't really know. We don't have the answers. Just by sharing experiences and hearing out everyone, we can put all these pieces together. And like
Yeah,
with what you've done with Ape Canyon, you've put the pieces together and you found it, man. And it's
well, yeah. Unfortunately, with Ape Canyon and just about a nickel's worth, about 5 cents worth of notoriety. Suddenly, people have brought me about 20 other really hot projects that I'm on of historical Sasquatch projects, and I'm 59 years old this year, and I'm going to be dead before I get them all done. But
wow,
I have lots more juice. I have
absolutely,
lots more tea to
absolutely,
work
man.
on of great weird old stories, and that's what I enjoy. Going out in the field, uh, game cameras, observation. I have lots of friends who do that, who are collecting some pretty amazing field evidence and documentation of contemporary accounts. What I'm good at, my specialty is the historical research. And I love re-researching these old stories, researching the human individuals involved and who they were. And all I'm doing is trying to add to the database because at if and when, let me say when, this species is recognized as an individual species, I can guarantee you that the mainstream scientific community is like, okay, sure, you probably have a recognized species, but what else do you have? So that's part of my gig is adding to the historical database to say, yes, with my research, this has been going on for 200 years. It's been going
Mhm.
on for a long, long time to give that provenance, if you will, to give that historical database of the other stories that I'm trying to re-research and provide document and maybe physical evidence to back it up.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Awesome stuff, brother. Mark, I have absolutely
Thanks, dude.
loved talking to you tonight, man. So interesting. And yeah, just thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. And
Well,
your work is incredible.
Tommy, let's do it again. I'll come see
Absolutely.
you. I'll come see you. You come see me.
Yeah, let's do it,
And
man. I want to go to Ape Canyon. I'll do the three
okay,
days.
man. Well, let's you and I go down and retrace Nick Redfern's man monkey down in
Oh,
Cornwall.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That will be a dream. Let's do it, brother.
No, that'd be a lot of
100%.
fun. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
Man, you're an
So yeah,
awesome
I
dude.
mean, dude, let's stay in touch. And I mean, if you want to have me back on, I'll give you an update here in the next year.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Anytime, man.
Right
Thank
on.
you. Can you
Okay,
tell the
cool.
listeners where they can find you?
Oh, sure. The easiest way is Facebook with Marc Myrsell. And I can probably guarantee with all the Facebook stuff that I do that if you friend me on Facebook, you'll probably unfriend me in about 30 minutes or so because I just like go, I just say whatever I want to say,
Yeah. That's awesome,
So,
man.
Facebook is good, and I try to keep people updated about any speaking engagements or what's going on with me. But also, my website is monsterhistory.net.
Awesome.
If you want to check that out, and I try to update. It's been a little while, but I try to update that as well. So anyway, through Facebook or monsterhistory.net, you can get a hold of me there.
Awesome stuff, brother. Your work is amazing. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. And I'm excited to
Thanks,
talk more,
dude.
brother. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime.
Thank
Give
you,
me a
man.
call. All right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. I'll see you soon.
Guys, thank you so much for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed it, share it where you can. That is a great way to support the podcast. And we'll be back very soon for more freaky conversations. In the meantime, stay safe and keep it freaky. Bye for now. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Tommy. That was badass. That was a lot of fun.